Tonight's San Diego's Evening News Radio 600 KOGO. Today, the confirmation for Neil Gorsuch. It was a wild process, a long process, one that involved several different twists and turns through the U.S. Senate. But the confirmation did go through today, and that means come Monday, he'll be sitting on the bench and already being part of the arguments for the U.S. Supreme Court. We are joined here on News Radio 600 KOGO by Dan Eaton, a San Diego attorney and a professor at the San Diego State Fowler College of Business. He's actually back in Boston right now at an event for Harvard Law where he and Neil Gorsuch attended at the same time here. So, Dan, always appreciate your time. What do you make of the final confirmation here today as things finally run through the U.S. Senate?
Well, Jack, it was inevitable that the Republicans were going to get this man confirmed one way or the other. What happened was, of course, that ultimately they exercised the nuclear option to allow him to be confirmed by a majority vote. But it wasn't a surprise. Neil Gorsuch, who the ABA said was well qualified for the job, was going to be seated on the Supreme Court. The Democrats wanted to make it as difficult as possible, and they really did.
And again, for those who have been following this process, either in depth or kind of on the cursory side, really nobody's found that smoking gun. Nobody's found a real political angle to take with Neil Gorsuch himself. He seems like a very solid justice, somebody who is relatively down the middle, somebody who has a wonderful career and a great resume. It was more on the partisan side that people were trying to defeat this, and really nobody found anything wrong with him.
Well, no. I mean, when you see down the middle, there's no question that Justice Gorsuch, now soon to be Justice Gorsuch, is going to be a conservative. But the basic problem, Jack, that they identified with him was that his name wasn't Merrick Garland. And, of course, that's a reference to Barack Obama's nominee to take Justice Scalia's place that the Republicans refused even to consider in the last year of Barack Obama's presidency. So that's what this was really all about. Now, there were some complaints made about certain aspects of Judge Gorsuch's record, but the bottom line is there's no question that he's eminently qualified to sit on the Supreme Court, and now the political dynamics were such that he will be sitting on the bench come next week in time to hear arguments before this term ends.
Dan Eaton with us here, San Diego attorney, a business lecturer at the Fowler College of Business at San Diego State. He is back at Harvard Law right now for an event as we get the confirmation of Neil Gorsuch. So what are the next steps? You mentioned Monday. Already he'll be hearing arguments and taking part on the bench. What are the next steps?
That's great. The next step is, of course, he'll be formally sworn in. There are actually two formal swearing-ins that ultimately he will take, and he will be eligible at that point to sit as the ninth Justice of the Supreme Court. The reason that's significant is because for the last year or so, since Justice Scalia's death, the court has been ideologically deadlocked 4-4 on some very important issues. This will give the court the ninth justice, and in time to hear some of the issues that remain in the term, including at least one significant term concerning the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, dealing with religion. So the extent to which public funds can be allocated to religious institutions. So Justice Gorsuch is going to be participating in some pretty momentous cases. And here's the thing. It's also going to affect the kinds of cases the Supreme Court is going to accept for review. They've been sort of leaning on the tame side of the kinds of cases they've been taking because they wanted to avoid these 4-4 splits. And some of the rulings they've issued have been fairly narrowed. Some definitive and important rulings are going to come down as a result of the Supreme Court returning to a full strength of 9 justices. And that's what you're going to see starting as soon as Justice Gorsuch takes his place on the bench.
Well, that's interesting because things have been so deadlocked, and it's been 14 months now since the passing of Antonin Scalia. So it's been 14 months where really the court hasn't been able to maneuver as much as perhaps they would have. So, Dan, give us an idea of some of the things that may now be on the docket for later on this year, coming up in June, and these other sessions for the Supreme Court. Some of the things that maybe they weren't going to do that now maybe they can, now that they're fully on the roster.
Well, that's a great question, Jack. And of course, the extent of the extent of deadlock can be overstated. The fact is, the court has issued an awful lot of rulings. The deadlock cases have really only been fewer than a dozen, I think, total, where they've actually deadlocked 4-4. But some of the issues include one that came out of California. The issue is going to resurface, and that is the union dues question about whether union dues can be withdrawn mandatorily. There was a case involving the teachers called Free districts that deadlocked 4-4. You can expect that to be definitively resolved. That was pending and had already been argued at the time Justice Scalia died. There are a number of other issues with respect to religion, abortion, transgender issues, all of which of voting rights. There are a whole range of issues, and not to mention, by the way, review ultimately of the split in the court concerning the immigration orders that Donald Trump has issued. There was just an issue where the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals said that sex discrimination under the federal civil rights law includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. There are other federal courts, including the Ninth Circuit, that disagree with that. The Supreme Court ultimately will have to resolve that split. Look, there's the full range of issues that the Supreme Court is expected to resolve. They will now be able to resolve definitively with some assurance that you're going to get a definitive ruling now that the court is a full 9-member strength.
Dan Eaton is at the Harvard School of Law right now. He's our San Diego attorney here in town, business lecturer at the Fowler College of Business at San Diego State. Dan, thank you as always for your time. Always appreciate the insight.
Great to be with you.